Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A grand jury in Georgia has indicted Donald Trump and 18 others, charging them with organizing a criminal enterprise to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. Trump faces a total of 13 counts in the indictment. Others indicted include former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, several of Trump's attorneys, including Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Sidney Powell, and Jenna Ellis, as well as former Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark. This marks Donald Trump's fourth indictment in just over 4 months. The 41 felony count indictment is built around Georgia's RICO law, which is often used to go after organized crime. This is Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis.
Every individual charged in the indictment is charged with one count of violating Georgia's Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act through participation in a criminal enterprise in Fulton County, Georgia, and elsewhere to accomplish the illegal goal of allowing Donald J. Trump to seize the presidential term of office beginning on January 20th, 21.
DA Willis opened the probe after Trump pressured Georgia's Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in January 2021 to, quote, find 11,780 votes. That was the margin Trump would have needed to defeat Joe Biden in Georgia. Part of the charges stem from a breach of voting machines in Coffee County, about 200 miles from Atlanta. The indictment alleges the criminal enterprise operated in other states, including Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and New Mexico. Fani Willis has given Trump and his co-defendants until August 25th to turn themselves in. This all comes as Trump is the Republican frontrunner in the 2024 presidential race. We'll have more on the story after headlines. In Hawaii, the death toll from the Maui fires has reached 99, expected to climb significantly as 1,300 people remain unaccounted for. Crews have searched for bodies in only about 25% of the devastated area. It's the already deadliest wildfire in the United States in over a century. Hawaii Governor Josh Green spoke Monday.
As I shared earlier, the scale of destruction is incredible, so our hearts are broken even a little bit more than when we were together 48 hours ago with the extra fatalities. Also, you know that we're well over 2,200 structures that have been destroyed. 86% of them are residential.
In a landmark climate case, a Montana judge has ruled in favor of a group of young people who've sued the state for violating their constitutional rights as it pushed policies that encourage the use of fossil fuels. In her decision, Montana Judge Kathy Seeley wrote, quote, plaintiffs have a fundamental constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment, which includes climate. The judge went on to rule, quote, Montana's emissions and climate change have been proven to be a substantial factor in causing climate impacts to Montana's environment and harm and injury, unquote. The case was brought by 16 children and young adults ranging from 5 to 22 years of age. One of the plaintiffs, 19-year-old Grace Gibson Snyder, recently appeared on Democracy Now! And talked about Glacier National Park in Montana.
Watching those glaciers melt is such a devastating thing because it's so iconic for the state. It's so essential for the well-being of the people and of the environment here. And it's just beautiful. And I would hate to be a part of a future where that's not present, where that's not a thing that my kids get to grow up with. And so, those are my impacts. And the plaintiffs in the case have, everything from respiratory illnesses that are exacerbated by climate change to a cattle ranch where the cattle are dying because of drought and famine and et cetera. And so we all have experienced this in different capacities.
The Montana ruling came on the same day that NASA confirmed last month was the warmest July ever recorded on Earth. Sarah Kupnick is NOAA's chief scientist.
It was the warmest July by a long shot, specifically by more than 1/3 of a degree Fahrenheit. That may not sound like a lot, but the margin for most global records is on the order of 100th of a degree or two. So last month was way, way warmer than anything we've ever seen.
In other climate news, more than 50 people have died in northern India after heavy rainfall caused devastating landslides. At least 9 of the deaths occurred when a temple collapsed in the city of Shimla. In Ecuador, another political leader has been assassinated, less than a week after the assassination of presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio, and just days before Ecuadorians head to the polls this Sunday. Pedro Briones was fatally shot in the northern province of Esmeraldas. He was a local leader of the Citizen Revolution movement, the party of progressive presidential frontrunner Luisa González and former President Rafael Correa. González blamed the soaring wave of violence in Ecuador on President Guillermo Lasso, who dissolved Congress in May to avoid impeachment proceedings. González wrote on social media, quote, "Ecuador is living its bloodiest moment. We owe this to the total abandonment of an inept government and a state taken over by mafias." At least 26 people died in the Amhara region of Ethiopia in a military airstrike Sunday. Eyewitnesses said the airstrike wounded at least 55 people. Ethiopia's government declared a 6-month state of emergency in the Amhara region August 4th after clashes intensified between regional groups and the Ethiopian military. There are reports of hundreds, possibly thousands of arrests in the region since the emergency rule began. The government of the Russian Republic of Dagestan has declared a day of mourning after at least 35 people were killed and 100 injured by a massive explosion at a gas station. At least 3 of the dead were children. Russian authorities have begun a criminal investigation. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces killed 2 Palestinians earlier today in a raid on a refugee camp near the city of Jericho. One of the dead was identified as 16-year-old Qusay al-Walaji. He's at least the 41st child killed by Israeli forces this year. Meanwhile, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz is reporting a Palestinian family evicted from their home in occupied East Jerusalem has been ordered to pay around $13,000 to the Israeli police and Israeli settlers to cover the costs of their own eviction. Monday marked the 10th anniversary of the Rabba massacre, when Egyptian forces opened fire on a sit-in where tens of thousands of people had camped out in Cairo to protest the ouster of Egypt's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi. Human Rights Watch estimates over 900 protesters were killed in what the group has described as, quote, the worst single-day killing of protesters in modern history. No one's been held responsible over the past decade. The Minister of Defense at the time was Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who's ruled Egypt for nearly a decade and is a close U.S. ally. Under al-Sisi, Egypt is now jailing about 60,000 political prisoners. This is the Egyptian human rights activist Hossam Bagat.
What we are demanding right now is accountability. Individual responsibility must be assigned, and we believe, and we have learned from the experiences of other countries around the world that also lived under military dictatorship, that the time for justice and the time for accountability will come.
A warning to our audience: the following story is graphic descriptions of police violence. In Mississippi, 6 former police officers who called themselves the Goon Squad have pleaded guilty to state charges after they raided a home and tortured 2 black men. On January 24th, the officers burst into a home, then beat, handcuffed, waterboarded, sexually violated, and tasered the 2 men, Michael Corey Jenkins and Eddie Terrell Parker. They sexually abused them with a sex device while shouting racial slurs. One of the officers put a gun in Jenkins' mouth for a mock execution and pulled the trigger. The bullet lacerated Jenkins' tongue, broke his jaw, and exited through his neck. The officers then planted drugs at the scene in an attempt to cover up their act. The officers have also pleaded guilty to federal charges. Visit democracynow.org to see our recent interview with the victims, Michael Corey Jenkins and Eddie Terrell Parker. Some of the officers face life in prison. In Nebraska, a judge has upheld a new statewide ban on abortion after 12 weeks and a ban on gender-affirming care for minors. Ruth Richardson, the CEO of Planned Parenthood North Central states decried the ruling, saying it was a, quote, devastating blow to Nebraskans' fundamental right to make what should be private decisions between them and their doctors, unquote. The number of unhoused people in the United States has jumped 11% over the past year, the largest increase in at least 15 years. This according to a tally by the Wall Street Journal. Rising housing costs and the cancellation of COVID-19 relief funds have helped fuel a rise in people unable to find or afford housing. And the Washington Post has revealed the Smithsonian Institution holds a so-called racial brain collection that contains 254 brains gathered in the first half of the 20th century at the behest of a racist anthropologist who was trying to scientifically prove the superiority of white people. An investigation by the Washington Post found most of the brains in the Smithsonian collection were removed from dead Black and Indigenous people and other people of color, often taken without consent from their families. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.